My brains is so addled I didn't recognize you at first. In fact," says he, tenderly caressing a lump on his head the size of a turkey egg, "it's just a few minutes ago I managed to remember my own name." "What happened?" I asked with interest. "I ain't sure," says he, spitting out two or three loose tushes. "Leastwise, I ain't sure just what happened after that there table leg was shattered over my head. Things is a little foggy after that, but up to that time my memory is flawless. Briefly, Breck," says he, rising in his stirrups to rub his pants where they was the print of a boot heel, "I diskivered that I warn't welcome at the halfway house, and big as you be, I advises you to avoid it like you would the yaller jandis." "It's a public tavern," I says. "It was," says he, working his right leg to see if it was still in joint. "It was till Moose Harrison, the buffalo hunter, arrove there to hold a private celebration of his own. He don't like cattle, nor them which handles 'em. He told me so hisself, just before he hit me with the bung starter. He said he weren't aimin' to be pestered by no durned Texas cattle pushers whilst he's enjoyin' a little relaxation. It was just after issuing this statement that he throwed me through the roulette wheel." "You ain't from Texas," I said. "You're from the Nations." "That's what I told him whilst he was doing a war dance on my brisket," says Tump. "But he said he was too broad-minded to bother with technicalities. Anyway, he says cowboys was the plague of the range, irregardless of where they come from." "Oh, he did he?" I says irritably. "Well, I ain't hunting trouble. I'm on a errand of mercy. But he better not shoot off his big mouth to me. I eats my dinner at the halfway house, regardless of all the buffalo hunters north of the Cimarron." "I'd give $1 to see the fun," says Tump, "but my other eye's closing fast, and I got to get amongst friends." So he pulled for Goshen, and I rode on to the halfway house, where I seen a big bay hoss tied to the hitch rack. I watered Cap'n Kidd and went in. "Sst!" the bartender says. "Get out quick as you can. Moose Harrison's asleep in the back room." "I'm hungry," I responded, setting down at a table which stood nigh the bar. "Bring me a steak with pertaters and onions and a quart of coffee and a can of clean peaches, and whilst the stuff's cooking, give me 9 or 10 bottles of beer to wash the dust out of my gullet." "Listen," says the barkeep. "Reflect and consider. You're young and life is sweet. Don't you know that Moose Harrison is pison to anything that looks like a cowpuncher? When he's on a whiskey tear, as at present, he's more painter than human. He's killed more men—" "Will you stop blatting and bring me my rations?" I requested. He shakes his head sad-like and says, "Well, all right. After all, it's your hide. At least try not to make no racket. He swore to have the lifeblood of anybody which wakes him up." I said I didn't want no trouble with nobody, and he tiptoed back to the kitchen and whispered my order to the cook, then brung me 9 or 10 bottles of beer and slipped back behind the bar and watched me with morbid fascination. I drunk the beer, and whilst drinking I got to kind of brooding about Moose Harrison having the nerve to order everybody to keep quiet whilst he slept. But they're liars which claims I throwed the empty bottles at the door in the back room, a purpose to wake Harrison up. When the waiter brung my grub, I wanted to clear the table to make room for it, so I just kind of tossed the bottles aside, and could I help it if they all busted on the back room door? Was it my fault that Harrison was such a light sleeper? But the bartender moaned and ducked down behind the bar, and the waiter run through the kitchen and followed the cook in a sprint across the prairie, and a most remarkable beller burst forth from the back room. The next instant the door was tore off the hinges, and the enormous human came bulging into the barroom. He wore buckskins, his whiskers bristled, and his eyes was red as a drunk Comanche's. "What in tarnation?" remarked he in a voice which cracked the window panes. "Does my gall-blasted eyes deceive me? Is that there a cussed cow-puncher sitting there wolfing beefsteak as brash as if he was a white man?" "You ride herd on them insults," I roared, rising sudden, and his eyes kind of popped when he seen I was about 3 inches taller than him. "I got as much right here as you have." "Name your weapons," blustered he. He had a butcher knife and 2 6-shooters on his belt. "Name 'em yourself," I snorted. "If you think you're such a hell whizzer at fist and skull, why shuck your weapon belt and I'll claw your ears off with my bare hands." "That suits me," says he. "I'll festoon that bar with your innards." And he takes hold of his belt like he was going to unbuckle it. Then quick as a flash he whipped out a gun. But I was watching for that, and my right hand .45 banged just as his muzzle cleared leather. The barkeep stuck his head up from behind the bar. "Heck," he says, wild-eyed. "You beat Moose Harrison to the draw, and him with the edge. I wouldn't have believed it was possible if I hadn't saw it. But his friends'll ride your trail for this." "Warn't it self-defense?" I demanded. "A clear case," says he. "But that won't mean nothing to them wild and woolly buffalo skinners. You better get back to Goshen where you got friends." "I got business in Warhoop," I says. "Dang it, my coffee's cold. Dispose of the carcass and heat it up, will you?" So he drug Harrison out, cussing 'cause he was so heavy, claiming I ought to help him. But I told him it weren't my tavern. I also refused to pay for a decanter which Harrison's wild shot had busted. He got mad and said he hoped the buffalo hunters did hang me. But I told him they'd have to catch me without my guns first, and I slept with 'em on. Then I finished my dinner and pulled for Warhoop. It was about sundown when I got there, and I was pretty hungry again. But I aimed to see Biz's gal before I done anything else. So I put my hoss in the livery stable and seen he had a big feed. Then I headed for the Silver Boot, which is the biggest joint in town. There was plenty hilarity going on, but I seen no cowboys. The revelers was mostly gamblers, or buffalo hunters, or soldiers, or freighters. Warhoop weren't popular with cattlemen. There weren't no buyers or loading pens there, and for pleasure it weren't nigh as good a town as Goshen anyway. I asked the barman where Ace Middleton was, and he pointed out a big feller with a generous tummy, decorated with a fancy vest and a gold watch chain about the size of a trace chain. He wore mighty handsome clothes and a diamond horseshoe stick pin and waxed mustache. So I went up to him. He looked me over with very little favor. "Oh, a cowpuncher, eh? Well, your money's as good as anybody's. Enjoy yourself, but don't get wild." "I ain't aiming to get wild," I says. "I want to see Gloria Lavenner." When I says that, he give a convulsive start and choked on his cigar. Everybody nigh us stopped laughing and talking and turned to watch us. "What did you say?" he gurgled, gagging up the cigar. "Did I honestly hear you asking to see Gloria Lavenner?" "Sure," I says. "I aim to take her back to Goshen to get married." "You deleted expletive," says he, and grabbed up a table and broke off a leg and hit me over the head with it. It was most unexpected and took me plumb off guard. I hadn't no idea what he was busting the table up for.